The Clean Air Act, passed by Congress in 1970, is the cornerstone of how the U.S. government keeps air clean. It's basically a set of rules and regulations designed to reduce air pollution across the country. For the automotive industry, this act has some very significant effects on how we operate in the United States. It's what gives the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, the power to set emission standards for vehicles and the replacement parts that go in them. Here's how it affects us. The EPA sets limits on pollutants like smog-forming chemicals and greenhouse gases. Automakers have to meet these standards, which has driven massive technological advancements. Things like catalytic converters, cleaner fuels, and now, the push for electric vehicles. Those are all directly tied to the Clean Air Act. The Act also cracks down on tampering with emissions systems. You can't just remove your catalytic converter or disable your car's pollution controls. That's illegal, and the EPA enforces those rules. Basically, the Clean Air Act has forced the automotive industry to innovate and take an active role in preventing air pollution, leading to much cleaner vehicles on our roads today. The Clean Air Act plays a significant role in regulating replacement parts for automobiles in the United States, primarily focusing on preventing increased emissions. Here's a breakdown of how it does so. Key regulatory principles. Prohibition of tampering. The Clean Air Act prohibits tampering, which includes removing or rendering inoperative any emission control device or element of design. This means that replacement parts must not negate the effectiveness of original emissions control systems. Regulation of defeat devices. The Act also prohibits the manufacture, sale, or installation of defeat devices. These are parts designed to bypass or disable emissions controls. Focus on aftermarket parts. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, concentrates its enforcement efforts on aftermarket parts that are likely to increase vehicle emissions. CARB standards. The California Air Resources Board, CARB, has very stringent rules, and CARB certifications are very important. If an aftermarket part has a CARB EO executive order number, it means that it has passed very strict emissions testing. This CARB certification has become a standard that is used across the United States. Specific regulations and considerations. Catalytic converters. Regulations like those in New York require the use of CARB-compliant aftermarket catalytic converters for certain vehicle models. This ensures that replacement converters meet emissions standards. Emissions-related aftermarket parts. Any aftermarket part that interacts with a vehicle's emissions system and changes its performance is subject to scrutiny. Manufacturers of these parts must ensure their products do not violate Clean Air Act provisions. Enforcement. The EPA enforces these regulations, and violations can result in significant civil penalties. In essence, the Clean Air Act aims to maintain the emissions standards of vehicles throughout their lifespan. Replacement parts must not compromise the effectiveness of original emissions control systems. CARB certification is a key factor in determining the legality of aftermarket emissions-related parts. The EPA has adopted the California Air Resources Board certification process as the primary avenue for demonstrating that any part that interfaces with a combustion engine found in a car, truck, or motorcycle does not degrade the emission standards set for that vehicle. The installation of a part that degrades the emissions of a vehicle below its approved limit is illegal, and anyone that does so may face severe penalties. Any aftermarket, performance, or add-on part covered by this regulation must obtain an executive order number from the California Air Resources Board. This is called the CARB EO ID. And CARB EO is specific to one or more vehicles, generally specific to a year, make, model, and engine. CARB EO ID informs the seller, purchaser, and installer of the part that it has been cleared for use on the specific vehicle and that its installation will not degrade the emissions performance of the vehicle, and it should not open them up to EPA prosecution. AutoCare has adopted the following standard to disseminate the CARB EO for parts and vehicles in the aftermarket. Within ACES, a CARB EO ID is added as a qualifier for the vehicles covered by executive order. For every product category that could potentially impact a vehicle's emissions within the United States, it is important that your ACES file contains a valid CARB EO ID for each fitment record that has been tested and approved by the California Air Resources Board. While not all vehicles or products are required to obtain a CARB EO, it is important that you understand the law and its potential impact on your customers and your company. For more information, visit www.epa.gov.